This is the Millennial Millionaire Through Real Estate podcast.
You can get Rich Dad, Poor Dad on YouTube for free. You can just Google it. You can listen to ads every 15 minutes, but it is 100% free if you just Google YouTube. Because like now it's all on there. But if you went and you bought that book for $20 and you read it, it is a completely different like mental commitment to it for that $20.
You're listening to the Millennial Millionaire Through Real Estate podcast, where we discuss tangible tips, tricks, and best practices for becoming financially free. The show is designed for people who want to either start real estate investing or for those who want to scale their real estate business.
What's up, guys? I'm your host, Jonathan Farber. I hope you guys are well and healthy. For any first-time listeners, thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. The goal of this show is to explore ways to become financially free through real estate or to increase passive cash flow through real estate. A little bit about myself. I work in corporate America at a software company, and my side hustle is real estate. I currently own 8 units, a mix of small multifamily and short-term rentals, aka Airbnb. I've house hacked, bird, flipped, and as mentioned, short-term rentals, to name a few strategies. I love to network, so hit me up on any platform, Facebook, LinkedIn, BiggerPockets, Instagram, or just search Jonathan Farber Real Estate, and you should find me. Also, if you are not already in the exclusive Facebook group, this is where I post most and do a lot of behind-the-scenes content of sharing deals, strategies, and systems. See you there. Let's get to today's show sponsor. After building my own portfolio, speaking with over 100 investors on this podcast, and many more from the Facebook group, I've noticed a few common themes of why people don't get started or remain successful in real estate. They don't have the right team, they aren't sure of their market, or they don't know where to find deals. The people at Martell Turnkey are fixing this. That's why they offer fully turnkey properties in markets where the numbers actually make sense. What does this mean? It means they buy properties at a discount, fix them up, put a tenant in place, and give you options for property management or financing. They have people on the ground in cities where you can still cash flow and see appreciation every single month. I'll say it as simply as this. When you have the right team and systems in place, there's no reason not to get started. If you like a property or have any questions, you can schedule a phone call by clicking on the link below or going on their website and clicking on the contact tab to set up a call. There is no hard sell, push, or commitment needed. The call will be there to answer any questions you have or to see if or how their products might be a good fit for you and what you're looking for. So visit martellturnkey.com and click contact, or send an email to info@martellturnkey.com today. What is going on, guys? Today we have an awesome episode with Adam Zach, and I laugh saying it because it's just such an amazing perspective that Adam brought to the table. Very relevant for me right now in my life, getting ready to do real estate investing full time, and really just hear how he thought through kind of his strategy and tactic, leaving his job or preparing to leave his job. We'll get to that in a sec. A little background on Adam. He is in Fargo, North Dakota. He is a civil engineer who got addicted to real estate. He has 26 homes at the moment that generate gross rents of about $40,000 a month. He owns most himself, but most are 50-50 with partners. And he's just scaled the business in an awesome way, buying kind of a couple deals a year, did it in a short period of time. He only got into this about 4 years ago. And we go through kind of all the details, nuts and bolts of how he was able to do this and snowball the properties to now be at a point today where he is financially free. And we'll kind of go into today's main learning, which is how to leave your job and stay valuable in the company. This is also a good segue into the tangible tip, but basically he was bringing so much value to his job. And we go through a specific way that he was doing that, of just getting good rapport with all of his higher ups. He was taking them all out to lunch. He was being in front of them a lot. He was being on their radar. He was going above and beyond so that they just wouldn't want him to leave. Like even when he quit, he said he quit on January 1st, but they asked him, what would it take for you to stay? And it wasn't about an amount of money for him. It was about a reduction of hours. So the main learning was to become very valuable to your company. If you want to use that to continue to buy real estate, the tangible tip is, after you've done that, to strategically ask your boss for a reduction of hours so that they're aware of it and that you can continue to build your side hustle, your passion, whatever you want to do, until you're ready to go full time. Doing it that way is probably the smartest, because you can do all these loans while you have this corporate umbrella over your head. Plus you have your insurance covered. You can just have all your technology covered. And basically it's just, why not? But if you can't, then maybe you should evaluate other ways. But the way he did it was just so practical. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy how he talks about it in the show and what steps you can take to lessen your hours as well. So without any further ado, awesome episode today with Adam Zach. All right, Adam, what is going on, man? Thank you for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Pleasure to be here, and it's great connecting with you, Jonathan.
Likewise. And man, you got a great story. You have an awesome kind of outlook that I think will resonate with a lot of our listeners, that has to do with navigating a W-2 and building a very strong portfolio outside of that W-2 and leveraging it to do so. And then basically, you know, how you can navigate maybe your current steps or what your plans are after that. Would love to dig into that. So from a high level, you mind just giving our listeners kind of the blurb on how you got into real estate, how you got the bug, now you're addicted, and would love to just hear kind of from a high level how you got into it, but then also from a high level where it's brought you to today.
Sure. It was an accidental house hack where I just bought a home that I wanted to honestly party with kind of my college friends. And so that was in 2012. I was like, oh, we'll get out of the apartments. I want to play beer pong in the kitchen and have no supervisors telling us what to do. Then turns out once you actually buy your own home, you care about it a little bit more. And then my roommate started paying me rent. And I was like, oh, this is covering the mortgage. This is before I knew anything about bigger pockets, any of that stuff. It was just kind of started doing it. And then realizing how cool it was. That's what got me onto the niche of like, oh, I really need to do this. But I didn't do anything for about 3 years. Moved, then got our official second rental. And then it wasn't until 2017 that it bought number 3. And then now up to, 25 here, just a few years later.
That's awesome. And you're in North Dakota. Is that where you started investing at the beginning, or is your portfolio somewhere else?
Yep. I would say 80% of it is here. And then just recently we've been expanding out.
Okay. Got it. So those first ones were in North Dakota.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. So it sounds like you house hacked the first deal kind of unknowingly, and maybe got your traditional low money down house hack debt. You don't have to put a lot up, and then you can rent out the other parts. And that was for me also the light bulb moment of, wow, this is kind of crazy how this can work, and you can get rid of your cost of living or maybe make money to live. Can you walk us through kind of the next couple of steps? Also, like where you were at in life? Were you working at a W-2 job? Were you kind of like in college? And then basically just kind of like, how did you start to snowball these things?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to school for civil engineering, got the engineering job, and I was like, oh, you get the job. And then I was, dating someone, then ended up proposing. I was like, oh, you're supposed to get married, and then life's happily never after. It's like, right? Like you'd think that if you just got the job, got married, everything would be great. But it's like, oh, maybe I just want to start thinking about life a little bit differently. I kind of call 2017 really my next wake up call, when I actually discovered what personal development was. I read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I was like, oh, what is this thing called personal responsibility? And like, I was playing the victim card so hard in life. Like, it was like, oh, there's no deals. Like, life sucks. Like, my job, my employer does this, my boss does that. And it's so funny just even talking about it now. Just, I couldn't even convince myself from 10 years ago, like what the thing personal responsibility was. It didn't matter how many people told me, like I had to experience it myself and be like, oh, I guess I can control how happy I am at my job and how happy I am in my life. And it's not all these external forces. Yes, there is some of those that you can't control, but that, famous quote where between, the event and the outcome is your response to that event. And so that overall philosophy really changed my life. So Jack Canfield talks about it. Viktor Frankl talks about how he was in a concentration camp, and even he could find, pleasure in certain things, of whether it's helping someone, giving someone some food. And so I was like, oh, if that guy can find happiness in that sort of condition, like I have zero excuses for anything in life. And so then that's when I got on the, reading a book about a week, got married, started thinking about, okay, life beyond Adam. Like I just wanted to extract as much fun out of life as possible. Once you get married, once my wife became pregnant, we were expecting our first child. I was like, oh, I guess life's a little bit bigger. And then that's when things just started, kind of those aha moments started going, like, okay, I need to do more. I was in engineering. I would Google like, hey, do I really want to be in engineering? Like literally right as I was sitting at my desk, it's like, man, this is just kind of soul crushing. Like this isn't what I signed up for. Yes, it's a high salary, but at what cost? And so then that's when I really started like, oh, should I gamble? Should I, play video games? Should I do stocks? Should I, do something else? It's like literally anything that could get my addictive style brain onto anything other than work.
So this is hilarious. And this is, I really know now, gonna hit a lot of people listening to this, because a lot of people listening to this don't like their job. It's not what they were meant to do. It's not what they're passionate about. It's not the thing that they jump out of bed for. It's a means to an end. It's a golden handcuffs. And I come from the same world, working at a software company, making a lot of corporate money, but also not liking it, and not liking it enough to leave, but also then think about ways that I can utilize it to build a portfolio and kind of sponge as much juice out of it as I can before then doing it full time. So can you talk, that's such good context and kind of like a foundation. So can you kind of talk through what you started doing after you decided you weren't going to go into gambling and all these other things that you were googling, like what were your steps? How did you kind of like take action in real estate once you decided that was your path?
It was helpful that I had done someone of the house hack and I could kind of understand it. I mean, Bigger Pockets and Rich Dad Poor Dad are just the classic, like, oh, that'll sell you on it fairly quick. But the stocks is like, okay, I can learn a lot of that, but it was return on investment and then return on time invested. Because the ROI on something is like, oh, I can make 100% on a dollar. Okay, that doesn't really mean jack if I put in 100 hours to make that dollar. And so I started really thinking about the return on my time invested. And that's where real estate was really cool from, the quote unquote passive income style piece of it. Whereas if I was day trading or trying to pick stocks, I personally, just didn't really find that. I tried to create so many different things. Like it was like, oh, I had an idea for this, an idea for that, an idea for this. And it was like, you know what? There's just so many people that are making money in real estate that it's just like a not if, but when, if you apply yourself and you just, don't lose, don't strike out swinging, on your first try and really get over your head. It's like, okay, 90% of millionaires make their money through real estate. That's a pretty strong statistic. Why don't I at least try that to maybe, go about that first path? And a fun short story is our very first rental, the tenants flooded the basement the very first spring because they forgot to put the downspouts on. We have like 6 feet of snow here. It thaws really quick. And I remember my wife and I pulling up carpet on a Sunday night being like, we are never, ever getting into real estate ever again. To now that being the avenue where in 2021, leaving the W-2 job, so down to 10 hours a week. And it's like, you just go through so many ups and downs as an entrepreneur. And in this case happens to be real estate that you're just like, oh, I'm so glad I pushed through, kind of the I'll call them the down points or the learning experiences.
Totally. So take us through the steps. What actually happened? What were the deals? How did you find them? How did you fund them? How did you snowball them? Because it doesn't seem like this was that long ago that you started doing this.
Sure. Yeah. So the second deal that I ever did was I was listing our existing home for rent because we were moving out of it and going to buy our forever home, which was like, a nice 5-bedroom, 3-bath in the right neighborhood. We were going to keep this one and do the rental. And as we were showing that one, we started up this idea of, well, what if college students just went and picked a home off the MLS? I bought it for them as a turnkey rental. And that's where this next property came from, is we had somebody that was like, they were touring our property number one because it was the turnover season in 2015. And we basically had another one that we were looking at buying. I said, hey, I'm thinking about buying this house. If I bought this house, would you and your 3 roommates want to live into it? And they said, sure. And I was like, oh, fantastic. So then basically I can close on it and have a cash flowing property relatively turnkey, because the vacancy is always what I was scared about. Is you close on a property, then you have to do any improvements, and then you got to, rent it out. And, back then I didn't know anything about buying a property at 80%, loan to value. It was just, I thought you could only find properties off the MLS, and that was my only choice.
So how did you know that these people how did you get connected with these students that were going to be your first turnkey tenants? Because that is such an important thing that I think people get stuck on, but it's also an unknown. Like, I don't want to buy something and then it just sit vacant. So if you could have the tenant teed up before you actually buy, that's ideal. So how did you get connected with those people?
Yeah, that's kind of how we did our first run at it, is if we had any existing properties that were showing and we were doing like an open house, we would say, hey, if you don't like this house, here's something else that we offer. And we created like a little flyer for them. And it was like, we buy homes, just off of it that you can rent. And that was kind of the first version one of our now company, the Set Your Rent, which is, buying homes for people that can't get a bank loan. And so that first step was existing inventory for rentals. But we also tried to go like knock on the door at the University of North Dakota and just like, hey, here's this cool program for your faculty or your students. Is anyone interested in this? And you would get some people like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. And trying to figure out who is the right person to talk to do that. And so we put up flyers probably where we shouldn't have. And it was just like this unique idea of trying to scale that way of just buying a home for college students.
Totally. Okay. Gotcha. So that was then, it sounds like the second deal was this deal that you had these tenants in place before you bought it, the college students.
Yep.
Is that what that was?
Yeah. So truly a signed lease before I even closed on it, because I had to write in there like contingent upon successfully closing on the property. Because like that would kind of suck if I actually couldn't close on it. And then like, oh, sorry, I guess you were going to move in May 1st, but I can't actually close on the property. So there was some potential risk there. Yep.
So interesting. Okay. And how did you find that deal? How did you finance that deal?
So for this one, it was in my own personal name, and I saw it as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a bonus room. And I was like, oh, I can do a 4-bedroom, and it doesn't rent here, but if I change it into a 4-bedroom, I think I can get more rent. So it's kind of a value add play. Mm-hmm. Turns out college kids don't care about a 4th bedroom. They just use a second living room as a bedroom anyways. So luckily I had to do nothing to it.
Got it. Okay. And that was on the MLS.
Yep. So sorry. Yeah. On the MLS. And back in those days, I think you could do the 80-10-10 instead of, doing 85% or 80% loan to value. You could do 10% down, 10% second loan, and then an 80% conventional loan.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. That's so interesting. Did you end up adding a bedroom in that property or no?
Never have yet.
Okay. Got it. Well, to your point, you didn't have a need for it really with college kids kind of just moving furniture around anyway. So, okay, cool. So you still have the job, you do your first like official investment deal. The first one was a house hack, which is cool. And then this was like kind of your first, just true, never going to live in it, rent it out. Take us through the next couple. How are you finding these deals? How are you funding them? How are you financing them? Any main learnings that kind of came through these, and they were all in North Dakota, I'll assume, but like what were the step-by-step for kind of how you acquired and started adding more units?
Sure. So this is then where we formed an LLC with another friend of mine, and we went in 50-50, and we were kind of friends, but not really like great business partners. And to this day still own, 50% of the portfolio with him. And this is where, okay, I can only put down 20% so many times before I just run out of capital. What would happen if we had someone else that we could just talk like you and I are doing, Jonathan? Because I realized that my wife maybe didn't want to talk about this as much as I did. Because like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. Like this is going to be life-changing, this real estate stuff. And so got a partner. And that's when we started doing in-house commercial loans. And that's different than the Fannie Mae conventional loan, because you have to fit into a certain criteria with a W-2, an income or verifiable income, a credit score, and then the bank is going to sell off that note to Fannie or Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and they're just done with it. These in-house commercial lenders actually keep the loan in-house. So think of like a local credit union. They have 1,000 people that each put in $1,000. So let's say that they have, $100,000 sitting there. They can then loan out a certain amount of that because they're only paying the people with a checking account like 0.1% interest. They're just loaning it out in-house, which is why we call them an in-house portfolio loan. And so now you can just structure those inside an LLC, and those are no longer going on our own personal names. Like if you pull our credit score, those loans don't show up because we're closing on them with an LLC, not within Adam Zock.
So those were still like the properties that you were finding and then just buying in an LLC. They were residential single family homes, or they were commercial loans. So does that program still exist, or is the main benefit of that it's just not in your name? Because what a lot of people say is, I'm okay getting it in my name and moving into an LLC, but because the terms aren't good on the front end, buying commercial loan properties, short amortization, higher rates, maybe variable rates, things like that. So is this a way to kind of fight through that and still get a liability from commercial, or is this still kind of something else?
I think we went commercial too early.
Okay. Mhm.
Like as a general risk profile, you can just stuff everything in an LLC. It's higher interest rates, but why not just take the super low interest rate in your own personal name and sell it off afterwards? Like in hindsight, really wish I would have just done that. Why not just fill up 10 loans in your own personal name at a 3% interest rate? And then after that, get creative. Like don't start paying for them, at a higher interest rate than what you would need to. Now, if you're going to do something creative where you're going to like sell it, or, the bank has like the due on sale clause, and you can get a little bit tricky on how you transfer the title over to different things, which I've never, ever seen a bank actually like
Ever.
say, hey, you have to do that. So
Right.
if I could go back, I would put more in my own personal name.
Gotcha. So I guess can you just maybe talk to like the listener out there who still has a job and they're trying to figure out what type of loans to get and how to utilize that job before maybe they don't have that job? Like what would the checklist be? And I'm curious to hear from you because I am in a similar position. I'm about to be full-time real estate, and I went through an extensive like trying to get every last box checked before kind of leaving the corporate umbrella. So I'm curious kind of how you thought about it or think about it or advice for people.
Sure. I would say, there's the large banks. Well, number one is the greatest advantage that you have, even though it's a disadvantage to be in the corporate world, is the fact that you have a W-2 and likely a high credit score. Like to the bank, that is the platinum card, is like a software engineer job, a civil engineer job. That's like, oh, this is as stable as it gets. You have a W-2. The bank, from our purposes, was just like, oh, just tell us when you want a loan. And as long as you got the cash, like we could care little at all. The nice part about getting into the commercial loan is they would never ask us where the 20% was coming from. Whereas if you're doing conventional, they want to see that like in your bank account, or see that you have a home equity line of credit, or see it, kind of seasoning, at least from my experiences in there.
Mhm.
And so that's why when we did the partnership and we both had more capital, we could do it that way. But if someone was like, hey, I really want to get into this, there's so many different ways to invest into real estate, but just the fact that you can walk into hopefully any lender that's a national bank or a mortgage broker where they're going to shop it around and find you the best deal, is talking with them and filling up your rental portfolio in your own personal name with truly high cash flowing properties. And
Mhm.
then as you're looking to get out of it, which is something that we've looked at, you could then refinance all of those properties into some sort of portfolio loan and pull them all out of your name.
So I'm glad you brought that up because it's something we haven't talked about a lot recently, because I feel like if people have questions, I'll just post it in our group. And like, there's a lot of lenders that we like now that we'll either recommend or that are getting referred more. But one question that used to pop up a lot is, do I go with a local bank, a big bank, a credit union, a mortgage broker? How do I know where to go? Like, that is so complicated that I'm just going to not do anything and go back to working my job that I hate. So like, what advice do you have for people that are trying to figure out which one of those routes to go and how to do it the easiest?
Yeah, I would say start with whoever you bank with, as just like getting the proof of a pre-approval. Being like, hey, I already bank with Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, I want a pre-approval for a $200,000 property. If they can't even do that, be like, hey, I'm considering taking my checking and savings account elsewhere. Because if they don't help you, like that should be their job. But I would always compare that with a mortgage broker and then a local credit union. Having those three, and if you don't get a response from someone, I would maybe change your approach of how you're tackling them and just talking with other investors in that area, whether it's a local real estate investment group, just saying, hey, who do you use for your lending to buy investment properties? And they might just give you a list. I found out that instead of just Googling, everyone, posing a really good question into an investor group can lead you on the referral path, which can get you there a lot quicker. If you just don't hear back from someone, you might just have hit the wrong person on the wrong day. Like their job is to give out loans, and they might just say, you know what, if I don't do this loan, they could potentially be working a W-2 salary, right? Like there's no financial incentive for them to be like, oh, I got all these PPP or all these commercial loans. Everyone's trying to refinance. If I just ignore that voicemail, and they don't call back again, then the problem's out of my hands. And so we've had to be pretty persistent with individuals before, but once you latch onto the right person, and for us, it was mortgage brokers, because they're compensated, not like on a percent scale of how high of an interest rate you can do, but just by the sheer number of transactions that they can do. And they were really trying to be helpful.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Because again, it's like, where do you go? And what I didn't understand starting this process was actually not even starting, like a couple of years ago when I was already doing it. I could not believe the differences in conversations you have from one credit union to one bank to one mortgage lender. Like, I thought it was basically just commodity. I thought you were going to hear the same thing from each, but it's just so not true. You called 10 different institutions and 10 different kind of like business functions, you will get 10 different type of loan answers based on your situation, which is good and bad, because that means that maybe there's a lot more calls to make than you necessarily want or think you need to. But the good is, if one is telling you something that you don't want to hear or you don't like or you disagree with, you can most likely call around and find someone who's going to give you a different answer. Now, they need to be able to execute against that different answer, because they're also probably a salesperson, and then they need to go back to an underwriter. But still, like, that's kind of what I take away in your comment there, that you need to find whoever is going to be best for you and works with other investors that kind of understands the game. So that's just really important. Let's keep talking through the portfolio. I mean, as you were adding properties, like, what was your strategy? How are you doing it? How are you able to scale? Like, people listening to this right now are wondering, how can I get 26 homes in a short period of time or a couple of years? Like, just take us through kind of how you snowballed that, like what your step-by-step was.
Sure. How I thought we were going to do it versus how we actually did it were two different strategies. So if you take me back to the end of 2017, we're like, oh, we're going to buy properties at a discount, fix them up, and we're going to have all this equity into them, and then we're going to rent them out, and that's how we're going to cash flow, almost like the Burr method. Turns out we suck at that. Like, we bought like a 1904 property, like, oh yeah, we'll put 10 grand into that and that'll just work. Not like, we put in 10 grand into like 3 windows, and like that does not improve an entire house. And so we went down that path. We still have that property to date, but there's no way we're making money on that. Like, it was just, we did not do it right. Like, we had to buy that property at about $30,000 less to actually make that property right. So literally the first step was just trying stuff. Like, okay, hey, we tried having a college student go pick something. Then we tried buying it at a discount off the MLS. Okay, that didn't really work. So then we started buying just turnkey properties that already had a tenant in them already, so that it was cash flowing. We knew that somebody actually wanted to live there already. So that was like deal number 3, 4, 5, 6 was, okay, we screwed up, bought it wrong. Then the next 3 was, we're only buying a property if it already has a tenant in it, so that we don't have the vacancy. And so that was strictly we just kept putting 15 or 20% down. So you could see how we then each individually invested, probably $100,000 of our own money to basically accumulate 5 to 6 properties, which in that case was like, oh yes, we've done more, but it was like, oh, well, now we're on the money. Now what do we do? And that's kind of when we transitioned into our version 2, which is what has really helped us to grow. But any questions on those first ones that I should elaborate on?
Well, you were using your own money. I mean, you were using your own money and you were putting down 15%. Is that the gist of it?
Yep.
Okay. So, and what were the typical price points?
So probably under 200,000, 150 to 200,000. So for each deal, we would say roughly 35 grand into it.
And how close to the deal were you? Like, are these within driving distance? Were you and we'll get to property management in a sec, but like, we have people come on and they have very different views on buying close to home versus buying out of state. So of the 26, how many of them are in your backyard, and how different is that experience from the ones that aren't?
Yeah. So the first 10 all in our backyard. The last 5 haven't even seen the property in myself. So definitely it was just a comfort thing. Like, oh, I generally understand this market. I can, see what the population growth is. I know who the mayor is. Like, I generally understand how the university impacts, this situation. And it just felt more tangible. It maybe wasn't as profitable, but it just felt more comfortable. Whatever it took for me to take the next step is what we were most interested in. Cause our mission was 10 grand a month per person cash flow, and whatever it took to get there, like that was our motto.
Yep, totally. So for anyone out there that's considering like doing this, the method that we talk about a lot is get as many residential loans as you can until you either hit the 10 or 8 limit or your DTI is just tapped out, and then start evaluating strategies and make sure that you have credit and that you have equity lines and that basically you have a path to protect yourself no matter what. So I guess as you kind of start to think about it now, you've mentioned that you're down to 10 hours a week. What is, I guess, kind of your path and plan and the boxes that you're trying to check as you get ready to leave your job?
So yeah, as of the first went down to 10 hours a week, in the civil engineering job, just so we could do more real estate. And
Hmm.
now it's trying to figure out, hey, since I didn't fill out all my conventional, what kind of approval can I get based purely on rental income, which looks very different from a W-2 income, which is going to be, likely a lot less. So that's what I'm currently going in. But still, for our overall model, we can still just go to a commercial banker and just say, hey, look at our portfolio. This is what we're trying to do. Mr. Banker, will you give us a loan? And if they say
Just
yes,
to make sure I understand what you're talking about here, are these commercial loans to an LLC or are these residential loans to you personally?
yeah, commercial loans to an LLC. So
Okay,
that
got it.
that was what gave me the personal comfort of being like, okay, if I don't need the W-2, I can go. So in our local market, it's like a Gate City Bank or Fargo Credit Union or Capital Credit Union, whatever the local or regional bank is. It's not a Bank of America. It's not a Wells Fargo. You can go to them and be like, hey, I'm buying rental properties. Here's my strategy. And they just basically say, oh yeah, as long as you put down 25%, like you got a good enough credit score, you got a track record of, your rent rolls or your rental expenses. It's almost just like they just personally invest in you. But of course they're, getting a loan, 80% loan to value like the bank is. So even if something went wrong, they get a property, at 80% of the appraised value.
Can I ask you about the 10 hours a week thing? Like I've talked about that with my friends and family, but not like as outwardly. You mind just giving some detail on like how you're doing that and basically like what your job is now? Like, do you have a boss that's aware, like, hey, I'm just going to be kind of weeding myself out, or is this something that's still a little bit more kind of like under the radar? And or maybe do you not have a boss? Are you like just a free? I don't know if that's like a
Mm-hmm.
contracted kind of civil engineer. Like just again, it's an interesting comment. I love it, but just to understand it more.
Yeah, the thought was there's no way I could ever leave my job because there's no way like financially we'd be able to afford it because it's like when are expenses coming? How is the cash flow going to work? How are we going to pay ourselves? So that was kind of always the thought in my mind. Of course, every now and then once we got a deal, I'd get like the entrepreneur ambition, like, oh, we can do this full time. I'm going to quit my job tomorrow, right? Like you always get those like macro thoughts and then little mini thoughts. And so what I ended up doing is we got to a point where we could financially within the business replace my W-2 income or about 70% of it. And I said, okay, that's enough to live on pretty comfortably. And I was coached early on that you could do two ways. You could eventually work yourself out of a job where they just fire you, or once you leave, they want you to stay so bad that they'll offer you whatever you want to get you to stay. And so I chose the latter path, being I'm still, even though like, yeah, corporate America is bad, all that stuff, I still said, okay, my employer is still going to get the better end of this deal. Like
Hmm.
throughout all the time I was doing real estate. So Seth Godin wrote a really good book on that called Linchpin, where he's like basically become indispensable so that they cannot replace you. Still, bring up leaders, still be an incredible leader and doing all this. But I basically told them I'm quitting January 1 and I just didn't say anything else. And they said, okay, like completely unexpected. They say, oh, it looks like the real estate thing is going well. And then the conversation was, what would it take for you to stay? And that's a really fun conversation where then I could say, from an hourly rate, here's what it is. And for my job, it was different. It's like, oh, if you're full-time, you get X amount of benefits. If you go to 30 hours a week, you still keep some of the benefits, but you're locked in at least 30 hours a week. And then 20 hours a week was like another cutoff. And I said, I don't care about any of the benefits. All I want is a dollar per hour time frame, and I want the flexibility to work anywhere between 0 and 20 hours a week.
Wow.
And that's what we end up settling on.
That's so cool. I don't think we've had anyone that's come on the show that has basically kind of negotiated your own basically terms. It reminds me like it's very top of mind. I'm rereading 4 Hour Work Week, and just it's probably my favorite book of all time. But how basically he recommends trying to negotiate that to just getting your hours consolidated and your days consolidated so that it's basically on your own terms. And that's the only way to keep it. And if you can't get it done on those terms, then it's just time to cut the cord. But it sounds like if you can do it that way, you can get the best of both.
Mm-hmm. And I think the key piece is if you're valuable to your company, and HR might come in and puff their chest like, oh, we can't do that. And any company can pretty much do anything that they want if it's within the best interest of the company. And that's always like, if you just have a great relationship with your boss, you're making your boss look good, like they'll usually go to bat for you. So for me, even though I'm an engineer, it was bringing in sales plus getting work done. And like, that is a dangerous combination. Then if you're just, potentially the numbers crunchers and they think you're, completely replaceable. But even so, do your job so well that you become irreplaceable. So if you say I have to leave, they go, oh no, don't go.
Got it. That's really good. I guess just on that, were there any standout things that maybe you did in your job that you felt you were above and beyond to kind of show more value? Like if there's someone listening right now and they're trying to spend more time on real estate, but they're still trying to show value and stickiness in their job, that it would be hard for the company to cut ways with them. Is there anything that stands out for you that you did specifically that was above and beyond from what your other peers are doing or were doing?
Sure. I invited out as many people as I could to lunch that were high influencers within the company. And I just picked their brain with questions, and people love answering questions about their life. And so it was for selfish reasons, just because I wanted to know how happy are they in their job, just like, now that they did it. Some of them were super happy. Some of them honestly didn't like their job. We're like, man, just 20 more years to retirement, just 20 more years to retirement. Other people are like, this is my calling. I love engineering. And it's like, oh, great. That can be for someone, but it's not for me. And so as I learned about this, I took the CEO out to lunch, and it was just constantly trying to, ask them questions and make them smarter. Rudy Giuliani, I sat in through one of his conferences, and he said, do two things. Never go to your boss with problems without at least 3 solutions, because your boss does not want to hear problems. Even if they're 3 super dumb solutions, just say, here's the problem. Here's 3 ideas of what I thought to solve that problem. And I thought that was a pretty big game changer. And then number 2 was make your boss smarter every day. And I was like, I can't make my boss smarter every day. They're supposed to make me smarter every day. But once you think about it, your boss is trying to do so many things at once that when you're like, hey, here's something that I noticed, or you share an article, or you share just an insight of like, hey, Susie and Bob were talking about this, just wanted to make you aware of this. Like, those 2 things is something that I took on from Rudy Giuliani giving a talk that I incorporated early in my career, along with just inviting a ton of people out to lunch.
That's so good. I just wrote that down. But it's like, these are all the ways that you can find out what actually matters to someone, and also just continue to stay kind of in their good graces. Like, who wants to be annoyed with problems? Like it's kind of like Don't Shoot the Messenger on steroids, but like you just want to be known as the solution person, the person that problem solves, not the person that just comes with problems, that hasn't done any thinking behind it and basically just punts it. So that's just not good. So, but there's one thing you brought up, and this is where I'm going to kind of go with like the next theme and kind of line of questions here, is that these people you were finding out if they were passionate or not about their jobs. And it's kind of put me down this very odd path of trying to figure out like, well, what do you do when maybe you're financially free, and like, what's a good use of your time? And also, like, most people, they're just living to work and they're not passionate about it, but they just do it because it fills 8 hours in a day and they make money, and it kind of just is what it is. So like, for you, now that you're on a path to very strong financial freedom, you're already there, you were going to quit your job. A question that I've been like, a couple of months ago, I was really stuck on this, and I was a little worried that I was going to get depressed about it, which was like, I'm financially free, but now what makes me happy? And like, what's exciting in my life? Because, I used to just live every day to work, and everyone else does the same thing. But it's like, if I have now all the time in the world, like, what do I do? What's the best use of my time? How do I figure out what I like doing? And luckily, I guess I was thinking about that before kind of I had to think about it. And now I feel like I have a plan for it. But I'm curious if you've had those thoughts, or kind of now what you think about is like your best use of time, and what you want to do with your time every day now that you're financially free and don't have a job, or a job that takes a lot of your time.
That's such a good question, Jonathan. Before I would have gotten to this position, I would have cared less. So what a great opportunity that you're actually thinking about it. I was like, if I quit my job, like that's it. I made it to the goal line. Like there is nothing else beyond that. And of course, we always know it just, oh, if I just get this promotion, oh, if I just get this one deal, oh, if I just quit my job, oh, if I just, run a marathon. There's never an end result. I honestly didn't think about it too much. And then after you've done it, it's almost like a little bit of this identity crisis where I was like, I always identified myself as an engineer. And like, now that I am not, it's like, oh, well then who am I? And so I had always been pretty big on setting large, ambitious goals where I was like, okay, the definition of wealth to me is super healthy, good relationships, and freedom. And MJ DeMarco is who I stole that from in the Millionaire Fast Lane, which I thought was a great definition of wealth, where it was, make sure you take care of yourself because you don't want to be 500 pounds and miserable with, $1 million in the bank. Or he always made the translation, would you trade lives with Warren Buffett right now? And the answer was, oh, I could have $1 billion, but then be whatever he is, 70 years old. And most people in their 20s or 30s would be like, no way. Like, I'm not giving up 40 years to potentially live in a 70-year-old's body. And so it was like, okay, so if that's not the best definition, it's what kind of health and vitality do you have in life? And then that second one is just who you're hanging around, whether that's family or friends, your network, the people that lift you up. Like, that's a key piece. So I'm personally in 4 masterminds myself. There's one just about life freedom. That's a bunch of entrepreneurs that just talk about life. 2 of them are real estate related. And then one of them is a dad's group. And so I just surrounded myself with people that I enjoy being around, that think like yourself and a lot of your audience that are listening, because I could go next door and I could try to have this conversation and they'd be like, oh, real estate, isn't that risky? And the conversation would be over. Right. And so all it is surrounding yourself with those type of individuals. But that is what I went through. It was, well, who am I now? What am I doing? And then a kind of just a feeling of gratefulness came over me, like, oh, today I played with my kids for an hour, woke up with our, 1.5-year-old at 5 a.m., played for 90 minutes, got them ready, went to the gym, showered, meditated, read a book, jumped on a podcast call. Like, oh, that is very different than what I could have done. And still, like, this afternoon, I was like, oh, I got a couple hours of free time. What exactly do I want to do? And so now becoming disciplined, to actually be productive and helpful things is kind of the next step of it. But now you get into kind of Maslow's top part of the pyramid, where you start saying, ooh, what can Jonathan uniquely do that no one else can do, or who can you uniquely help that no one else can help? And then once you start answering that question, you start having a lot of fun in life.
Yeah, there's just so much there. I hope people take from that what I just took from that, but it's so important. And again, you might not be in the place where you feel close to financial freedom, or you might not be in the place right now, but just know that there is a path. But then at the same time, it's just funny. The mind is such an interesting thing that once you get there, you take on these new stresses and these new things that fill your mind space of, should I be doing more, or what should I be doing? There's no fireworks that go off the day that it happens. There's no parade. It's kind of just a Tuesday and it's raining and it's cold out, like it is what it is. So it's funny to think about. It's interesting, but it's cool that you mentioned that you kind of now realize it's about the people and family. I love that quote about kind of the definition of wealth. Can you maybe we'll tie off on this, talk about the masterminds you're in, and kind of like in a little more detail how you found them, or kind of what they do for you? Because I'm a big believer in them. I'm in masterminds myself. I run a mastermind. And for me, it's been such a way to really improve the key relationships and personal relationships in my life. But I know a lot of people are skeptical. And for anything that's paid, there's for good reason, there's a big kind of negative association with paid gurus and some paid education. A lot of it's good, and then there's some that's bad. But there's a lot of people out there that might be kind of, their stigma is, I can't pay to join a mastermind. I'm not going to pay to do something like that. That's ridiculous. Like I have my friends, I have this. So can you just maybe talk to some of the groups, how you found them, and then like a little more detail about what you like about them?
Sure. The way that I now equate it, which was you can get Rich Dad Poor Dad on YouTube for free. You can just Google it. You can listen to ads every 15 minutes, but it is 100% free if you just Google YouTube, because like now it's all on there. But if you went and you bought that book for $20 and you read it, it is a completely different like mental commitment to it for that $20. Because one is free. Oh, it's just someone trying to sell me stuff and like, oh, it's all free. I went to Amazon and I bought that book and I used my money to now invest in that book. Like I am taking notes. I am, so detailed about it. And so then once you think about that, just on a larger scale, once you start putting $1,500 or $2,000 a month into masterminds for people to potentially coach you, connect you with other people, or be in parts of groups, you take it so seriously. You're like, oh, if I don't show up on Monday, that costs me like $400. Like I'm showing up on Monday to do something. I don't have the excuses. So having the wherewithal there, it was kind of the first piece. The first group that I went into was Total Life Freedom by Vincent Puglisi. He wrote a book called Freelance to Freedom, essentially how he was, photographing the NFL and then eventually went into, doing his own side business in photography. And now he's just kind of on a lifestyle design where he does coaching. I've been in that mastermind for almost 3 years. And so having invested in that every single month for the last 3 years is like incredible. And what's ironic is 3 years ago is when I did my first, mastermind. Then 2 years ago is when I did the W2 Capitalist mastermind. About a year ago was Paul David Thompson's. He has the Level Up mastermind. And then just recently here, 3 or 4 months ago, did the Dad's Edge because I got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And what's amazing is the number of properties since it's either we just happen to get to the hockey stick point of the growth, or it just happens to be we went from 5 to 25 about the same time that I started, joining mastermind. So it was either a correlation or a causation. And so we've slowly pivoted to that idea of, okay, now we're just going to buy homes and sell them on lease options or contract for deeds. And now that is our game, and that is the way to go. So those were the 4 masterminds that I'm in, and am going to continue to participate in those.
Adam, this has been so awesome, man. Before we hop, what is exciting for you that's coming up? What are some of the projects you're working on, or what do you think 2020 is going to look like for you?
Sure. So for 2021 here, looking forward is this. I kind of have like an 80-20 where our business model, where we're buying homes for people like entrepreneurs that can't get a bank loan or small business owners, is like the 80% of it. But then the other 20% is I've started funding people that are just trying to get into the real estate game to do flips and other things. What's really cool is when someone's like, hey, I found a deal, but I just don't have the money. Like helping that person get that first deal is, so I've done, just 2 or 3 of them, but that's really what I want to do. Because if I can help someone do their first one and maybe coach them a little bit and be like, hey, this is a good deal or not a good deal. And by the way, I'll fund it if it is a good deal. And then allowing them to just take it from there are 2 things that I really want to do in 2021.
That's awesome. Adam, what's the best way for people to connect with you? Social media, or just get in touch, follow the journey, all that?
Sure. I would say either of our websites. So it's either setyourrent.com, which is our business model, or my own personal website, which is engineeringrei.com.
Okay. Awesome. Love it. Adam, you have an awesome way of explaining things. I feel like I have 8 or 10 clips that we could use, just great sound bites. And the one that I really love is the paid kind of thing, that the Rich Dad Poor Dad. I mean, there are many, but that was just the last one you kind of ended on. The Warren Buffett thing was awesome. Like trading places. We have time, but just really good. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, and it should be fun to watch for the rest of 2021 and kind of as you build this even bigger in the coming years.
It's been a pleasure, Jonathan. You asked fantastic questions and happy to share. And if anyone wants to reach out, I'm happy to jump on a call.
Awesome. Thank you again, Adam.
You're welcome.
Hey, you millennial millionaire. Are you looking for help getting to the next level in real estate? Are you looking for accountability and strategy to achieve your goals? If so, Jonathan is now taking on one-on-one students and opening a few spots in his private mastermind. It's affordable and welcome to everyone. If you had any questions or think you may need a boost, send Jonathan a message on Facebook or email at johnjfarber@outlook.com.